Good morning. Welcome back to the Risk Management for Small Businesses series. In the previous episode, I gave you an introduction to compliance risk, and in this introduction, we covered what compliance and compliance risk is. Also looked at why it is a very topical issue or why it is important, and then lastly stated the different categories of compliance risk. So remember, I stated that in the following episode, I would then look at some of the different categories that I stated and, would give different examples of compliance exposures faced by small businesses. This is what we are going to cover in this episode. Jumping on to the different categories, our first example revolves around labor compliance. And what you need to know as a small business owner is that in South Africa, there are different acts, such as the Basic Conditions of Employment, which I think this one is more relatable to small businesses. Then there's also the Labor Relations Act, or the LRA, and several other legislations that set out various labor standards and regulations that all businesses, regardless of size, should adhere to. So a failure to comply with these different regulations can lead to severe penalties and legal consequences. I can pick one example that might be relatable to you as a small business owner. So there's one which is stated under Basic Conditions of Employment Act, which is that your employees should not work more than 45 hours in any week. And this would mean that they can only work for, let's say, 9 hours or less if they're working 5 days or less in a week. And then they're only allowed to work 8 hours or less if they work for more than 5 days in a week. So to help you understand your exposure as far as labor-related issues are concerned, we have some clients who rely on electricity for their production and have been affected by load shedding. So some of them have actually resorted to shifting the hours they work, making it difficult to track the actual hours their employees are working in a bid to finish all the work when electricity is available. So because of this, they actually stand the chance of being prosecuted if found guilty for actually making their employees working for longer hours, more than what they are supposed to. And then another example under labor-related matters is that if you fail to pay your employees the minimum wage or neglect to provide adequate working conditions, you may face fines and damage your reputation, which would potentially result in you losing your customers or these talented people leaving your company. So let's now move on to a different category or a second example in this episode, which is that of protecting consumer rights. So a notable example in South Africa is the Consumer Protection Act, and this legislation actually protects consumers from unfair business practices and actually ensures that the consumers' rights are also respected by the different companies that save them. So you as a small business owner must make sure that you do not, number one, mislead consumers. Then number two, also engage in deceptive advertising. Or number three, provide substandard products or services. And if you do any of this that I've mentioned, you will face legal action, or maybe you are forced to pay some fines or even damage your reputation in the long run. The third category, we have financial compliance. And as a small business owner in South Africa, you must comply with tax regulations such as the SARS requirements. Failure to meet tax obligations such as late or incorrect tax submissions can result in penalties, interest charges, or potential audits. Non-compliance with financial reporting, such as maybe inaccurate or incomplete financial statements, can also lead to legal consequences. As our last category in this episode, we have data privacy and security compliance. So with the Protection of Personal Information Act, which is POPIA or POPIA or whatever you might call it, businesses must ensure the responsible handling and protection of personal data. Failing to comply with data protection regulations can result in significant fines and also damage to consumer trust. So for this, let's say that you have a small business that sells shoes online, and maybe you are using a content management system such as WordPress to run your online store. You might actually experience a data breach due to maybe inadequate security, and you might also fail to obtain proper consent for processing your customers' personal information, and this would then potentially lead to legal liabilities and reputational damage. So, as I mentioned in the previous episode, remember guys, this is not an exhaustive list, and I have just touched on the most common examples to help you have a better understanding of compliance risk. And my second goal in giving you these examples is to also help you identify some of the key areas that may expose you to compliance risk. So thank you so much for joining us in this episode. If you find it helpful, be sure to subscribe to our channel and visit our website for more valuable resources on risk management for small businesses.